Come with me to a magical place where being labeled the pork queen is a compliment, where being nice is just a way of life, and where all leaders of the free world must pass through. Welcome to Iowa. Whether you're a current Iowan, an Iowa expat, or an Iowan at heart, this show is for you. This is the Iowa Podcast. Real Iowans, real talk, no drama. I'm Justin Brady, and it is quite a month in sports news. And as you all know, I know nothing about sports except for the fact that I go to them. And so a big sports news isn't necessarily in the world of sports, but in the world of radio. And so we have in here with us Keith Murphy, sportscaster extraordinaire, Channel 13, and at least as of a couple weeks ago, KXNO radio host, but that's ending soon. That's the big news, right? Thanks for coming on the show.
It's a pleasure to be here, and it's ending at the end of June. We're doing the Murph and Andy show until the end of June. I think it's June 28th on a Friday, and then having a party.
And we were teasing around on, as I was trying to convince you to get in here and do this show, I was saying the headline should be State in Mourning. I don't remember what I wrote. State mourns loss of, because it was 15 years, right, on KXNO?
15 years and a couple of months, and it has been so nice, the feedback we've gotten from people. It's been really positive. But I've also been around long enough to know that people will find something to fill the space with. They always do.
Nonsense.
There's the mourning period tends to be pretty short, and then people get on with their lives and find something else, which is the way it should be.
Rumor is people are boycotting radio now. You had to come in here under armed escort because there was fire in the streets.
That's right.
So everyone's been asking you, why'd you leave? Mm-hmm. I'm not going to ask you that. I want to know, why'd you stay for 15 years? Because you're doing the news show on Channel 13, which is a lot of work. Mm-hmm. And then you're doing the radio thing. That's intense. How did you keep that going for 15 years?
Well, the radio part is the part I enjoyed the most. That and Sound Off, because on Sunday night on Sound Off, we get to do commentaries and some humor and occasional satire.
Right.
Maybe a skit here and there. And that's fun. And the radio show just allows you the space for conversation. And what Andy and I wanted to do is try to have nuanced conversation where we would keep an open mind, learn something, try to listen to what people are saying, and also have fun. There's also toilet humor, and we act like we're still in 8th grade sometimes, like guys tend to do when they get together. So we wanted it to be a little bit like when you get together with your buddies and you talk about everything. You might talk about movies, and might talk about relationships, and then it moves over to restaurants and bars and coworker frustrations and this and that. And then we would just keep coming back to sports as the touchstone.
Yeah.
But calling it sports and more, and kind of going all over the place and just trying to have a conversation like that. And that's what I enjoyed the most. So that is why we kept doing it. But it was 6 days a week between radio and TV, because I work on Sundays, and so does Andy.
Right.
So it was a long time to do that, but we kept doing it because we were really enjoying it, and it was hard to give up for those reasons. But we decided with our contract ending at the end of May, and we're appreciative that iHeart offered us a new deal, but it just seemed like the right time, and we're able to give a month's notice and kind of say goodbye.
Yeah, and for those that aren't following along, what you said there was key. This wasn't, at least according to anybody that you've said, this was a positive thing. They said, hey, please come back. You said, I just don't have the time for this anymore. That's basically, now whether there was like in the inner halls of iHeartRadio, there was hot debate, we'll never know. But that's what that's the story that you've told over and over again.
Yeah, one of the things we did is before we went in, and when I talked to Andy, who's in a different position in life than I am, he still has kids at home. I'm now a new empty nester. He's where I was 10 years ago. So I wanted to make sure that he was okay. I said, well, what if they say, and it's hard to imagine this in the world we live in, but we're still out, even if they say, we'll double your pay, we're just out. And he said, I'm out no matter what.
Yeah.
So then at that point, we decided that when we talked to them, once we started talking, we would just take any potential negotiation out of it. And they were great. They were understanding, and they're throwing us a party at the end. We're having a couple of remotes in our final week. So nothing contentious about it at all. We're appreciative.
Yeah, that's really cool. For those that don't know, I was at iHeart for a while, and then there was this, and actually I'm going to ask you about this because this may have been one of the, there were some top sports moments, some crazy ones too. And I think this was around, I don't remember when this was. You probably have better memory of this than I do. But there was this iHeart axed like every show on KXNO, like cut it to the bone. Now, for those that don't know, that was a national thing. They cut a lot of stuff, but they were supposedly cutting like a lot of weekend stuff. And somehow KXNO, like the entire lineup, got the axe, and
our show didn't.
Yeah, your show didn't, but the entire lineup got the axe, and people were absolutely horrified. And rumor has it that you may have gone to the management and had a few words, and something turned the tide. What happened?
We didn't really go to management and have words like that, but what we found out...
I heard there were baseball bats involved.
There's pitchforks, protests, placards, signs. We found out the day that it happened that our producer and a key to the Murph and Andy radio show for a long time behind the scenes, Andrew Downs, who ended up kind of becoming a third voice on the show. But he did like a lot of the hard work that you understand more than most. Hey, can you get this audio? Can you get this audio? Can you find this? Like, he was a key to the show. And we found out that he had been fired. Our show was not fired.
That's right.
But he had been fired, and he was the program director.
Right.
And the morning rush was fired with Travis and Ross in the afternoon show, or Chris and Ross at that time in the afternoon. They were let go as well. And what we found out is that Andrew Downs, who had been a loyal employee and a great employee, he and the others, including Heather Burnside, everybody who was laid off that day, they were like led to their cars with their stuff in a box.
Right.
And it was like these aren't criminals. I get that there are corporate cutbacks going on, but we can't give them a week's notice or 2 weeks notice or something. It was really offensive to the way they were treated. And it wasn't personal. I'm not saying the people on the grounds, they're following orders from a corporate office somewhere and some managers that don't even know us in some other state. But it was just done in a way that offended us, and we were hurting for our friends.
Yeah.
So what we did is just release a statement publicly that we're not doing our show today. We're not comfortable with the way our friends have been treated. We're hurting right now. We need to figure out if we want to continue to do our show. And we didn't do our show for 5 days.
Yeah.
And in that time, many sponsors stepped forward, which is, as somebody in this space, that's a big deal.
That's
when
loud.
The sponsors, that's loud, good word. They said, we're going to pull many of them. I'm sure it wasn't all of them, but many of them stepped forward and said, we're with Murph and Andy. We're with the people who have been let go. If this is going to stay like this, we're out. And then the listeners, which in a time where it's increasingly difficult to build up loyalty, but they just really were loud. And by the end of the second or third day, Joel McRae, who was the general manager at the time, he's not anymore, but he said, hang on, I'm working something. And he got back to me and he said, I think I have a plan to hire everybody back, which is hard for me to imagine because, Justin, I've never heard of that before or since.
Yeah.
To the point
I
where
haven't either.
There were some radio stations, one in particular in this state, that they were convinced this was a stunt because
Wow.
it was hard to imagine this coming around. But what Joel did, and it was smart, there was an alternative FM station at the time, 106.3, and he convinced iHeart, if I can have that station, I can double the KXNO ratings because of the reach, which means the advertising will be there, which means we could continue to pay these salaries. So by the end of that week, everybody had been hired back and we were back on the air.
Yeah, and to his credit, he was even doing like on-air ads saying it was my decision, I screwed up. So to his credit,
he kind of fell on the sword in a way because
he kind of did.
He didn't.
Yeah, that's true.
He didn't want to do any of that, and being honest, we got too much credit because we have other jobs, full-time jobs at WHO 13. So I would like to think I would have taken this principled stand if it was my only job. But I can't say for sure.
Right,
We'd all like to
right.
think that. But we had a backup.
Yeah.
We already had a full-time job with benefits. This was our second job. And that did make it easier to take a stand. If you're thinking about, college educations and your health insurance and making sure your kids are well fed and paying for their activities and all that, you might give a little bit of pause and get back on the air.
So you do use the word stand, though, which is a strong word. It wasn't a matter of just, we're going to, this is upsetting, we're going to take a break. When you use the word stand, I do wonder, was there a conversation in the back end saying, this is wrong, we're done until you right this ship? Was that a strong conversation had behind the scenes? Or maybe implied?
We didn't really have it behind the scenes. We just released a statement via social media. And when I spoke with Joel, I told him our position in a friendly and professional way. And he understood it. And within, 48 hours or so, he said, I've got an idea. And he kept trying to get us to come back and do the show. But we just said, we just didn't want to. We needed to figure out whether we wanted to continue. And at that time, we were trying to decide whether, do we want to keep working here after this happened? We weren't really thinking they're going to hire these shows back, because I'd never heard of anything like that. That had never happened.
I don't know.
So I was surprised.
Do you know if it's ever anything like that's ever happened in the history of like media in general?
I know when Rolling Stone called us for an interview, we were like, okay, this, Rolling Stone called. They did a story on it. Did you do the interview with Rolling Stone? We did, yeah. Andy did.
I forgot about that.
Andy did it because he grew up.
Is this the one where Andy posed with his shirt off for the cover?
Yeah, it is. It is. Yeah, with holding nothing but a guitar over his crotch. No, I knew that he had grown up.
Thank goodness
just
they pulled
enamored
that.
with Rolling Stone.
Yeah.
I mean, it was like one of the big deals of his life. He always had a subscription and all that. So they called me and I said, could you talk to Andy? He would be thrilled. And he gave them good quotes, and it was kind of cool. And then Barrett Sports Media gave us some award that year for, in their words, taking a stand. But it was a little more complex than that. And like I said, we have gotten too much credit. It's not exactly, some of the principled stands that have taken place in labor history, but it was one of those reality checks for all of us that during that time that this could happen at any time,
right?
Because it's most all media now, legacy media, is not locally owned anymore. They're owned by these huge corporations, and their main objective, no matter what they say it is to keep the publicly traded stock price up.
Right.
So you are at the mercy of the winds sometimes.
You'd think it would be, but sometimes the decisions they make do not have an impact on stock price the way they think they should.
Right.
I remember that around that time, but I was like so part-time. I was doing a weekend thing. 2 people listened to it, on a good day. And at that time, someone asked me, they're like, oh, your show's gone too. Do you want to make a comment? And I'm like, dude, no, just don't, please don't even mention it, because I have a full-time gig. This is my fun thing that literally none of my clients know about. But that was a crazy time. You've through your radio career and your TV career, there have been a couple, there have been several, you're a news guy, so there's been a lot of crazy stuff, but 2 unprecedented things, which was that, but then also COVID. Right. And most news people had stories upon stories. Everyone was running COVID all the time. Here's the new variant. Here's the new thing. Just strictly from, obviously COVID was a terrible time, strictly from a news standpoint, lots of news to cover, lots to do, lots of work. But you're the sports director. You're doing sports coverage. Right. So was your initial reaction, I know it feels like it was forever ago, but was your initial reaction complete and utter panic, or, hey, this isn't too bad, maybe we get a kick back a little bit and slow the pace down?
I think, like most people, my initial reaction was just trying to figure out what was going on and where is all this headed and how worried do we actually need to be just about our lives and our community and all that, because there was a lot of contradictory information out there. So I was just trying to get to anything that was factual and not agenda-based, not something like so many things are in society right now that is used for a political purpose one way or the other. Is just trying to get to that. And as far as sports goes, one of the things I was proud of, like over at 13, we were one of the few stations in the country. We did a sportscast every night during the entire pandemic, but and we did a radio show every day. And one of the odd things in looking back at it was that our ratings went up. But when you think about it, people also had more time on their hands and they were looking for information. But it was something where I think, looking back, we probably grew as people, as many people did, because it's that reminder that, oh yeah, hey, sports is just entertainment. We all get too wrapped up in it sometimes, but there's the real world, and then there's the entertainment diversion that sports creates. So what we tried to do during that time, both on the radio show, on Channel 13, on Sound Off, on my social media pages, was just look for ways for people to spread some positivity, because a lot of people were down. So we were each night, like there might be kids at the University of Iowa or Iowa State setting up some crazy game tricks in their dormitory. They probably did 500 takes, and then they get one on video, and it looks amazing, and they send it to us. We would put that on, or people would have, their kids doing something crazy in the backyard, or just some mural made out of chalk on the driveway. So just photos, videos, any of that stuff, we would put that on, and the reaction to it was really positive. So we kept doing more of it and getting more in. And then the reporters over at 13, John and Mark, they started doing a lot of stories on stuff that we never would normally get to, like somebody who's really good on a unicycle, or I remember this one person that did some kind of, I don't even quite understand it, but those maybe you can help me with the words. It's like the
hand motions are not helping me.
Yeah, it's racing with like these
marble racing.
Marble racing. Yes. Thank you. We did a marble racing feature story, and it was really interesting. Thank you. That was pretty good. You're probably good at charades. Jeez, that was not a good hit.
Well, I think I remember marble racing.
We did a story on marble racing. So
it was interesting, I will say. Yeah. But it also does sound like something out of like a parodied news program.
It does.
Where we don't have any content, Johnson. What should we do? Marble racing again?
Yeah. And then on Sound Off, we tried to do skits that were, that really highlighted how ridiculous some of this arbitrary stuff was, like 6 feet, not 5.5 feet, 6 feet. So we would have two guys in mass playing a game of chess, but with grabbers, 6 feet apart, with an announcer who's down the street because he can't be in the same room with them. Good. So we did some of that stuff, and then we had some contests like greatest sports moment in Iowa history. We did it, bracket style, and all the way to the championship. And then we did do one thing. It was my idea, and it was a bad idea. It was biggest punch to the gut or kick to the junk in sports history. So it was like your most painful local sports memory, and Cyclone and Hawkeye fans would send them in.
A good idea, though. It's a great idea.
It's a good idea for like a different year, but we weren't that far into it where the comments were starting to pile up, like, really? During the pandemic, and I've been laid off, or I got a real kick to the junk. I have to be reminded of this negative thing. Why would you do this to me? That kind of thing. So might have not have been thought out the best, but good intentions.
Yeah, I mean, people needed the lighthearted moment, right? Like, we can't have a complete death of humor. Like, they needed that lighthearted moment. And that's one of the things I remember is you doubling down on positive, just hitting people like almost like a boxing match, trying to knock them out with positivity, which I really appreciate that. What are some other throughout the radio career, but also your TV career. I know you're coming up on 20 years here in 2 years. Not to rush
30
it, of
years.
course. Is it 30? Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Yep.
Thank you. 30 years
No,
in 2 years.
thanks for saying 20.
Yeah. 10 years, right? Didn't you just graduate from college last year? So what are some of the, obviously, huge sports career? Now, you've been in for Channel 13. How long for Channel 13?
28 years.
28 years. So a long time in Central Iowa, covering Iowa sports.
Yes.
So are there some other just huge, like big sports moments that you're never going to forget from this state?
Absolutely. There are, gosh, probably more than I could deliver, more than anybody'd want to hear off the top of my head. A couple that come to mind. I got to go to the first Field of Dreams game over in Dyersville between the Yankees and the White Sox. And I had real reservations about that because I love the movie, and I just thought, is this going to be completely cheesy?
Oh, interesting.
But Costner flew in for it, and the game, it was played. It was a great game. It was decided in the last inning by a home run into the corn, and they just got it right. I wish they could have done one and been done because I was like, it's never going to get better than this. They had huge ratings. People watched it. They had these incredible drones everywhere that were going through the farmhouse and over the cornfield, and just walking through the corn with the Yankees and the White Sox and interviewing them as they're, trying to get their mind around where they are and how this happened. That was a really cool event. I was in the Citrus Bowl, probably to be about 2004, when Iowa beat LSU on the final play of the game on a Hail Mary type pass. That went nuts, and that was crazy. Got to cover the Iowa State team that was a few minutes away from going to the Final Four in basketball, but never scored the rest of the game. And Larry Eustace, I was there when he got tossed for going out on the court, and that all fell apart. I think that actually won our aforementioned kick to the junk gut punch contest that we had, ill-advised one. Covering Caitlin Clark and the Hawkeyes in 2 runs to the national championship game.
Crazy.
Yeah, just things like that. You don't forget the bowl games are fun, though they're becoming increasingly less important. But just those have been
just because there's more of them. You mean?
Just because they've changed from it being bowl games being really important to switching the emphasis to a playoff. So the bowl games are now more like an exhibition, and more players are opting to not play in them because they don't want to risk injury, and they've just gone from this big deal to a lesser deal.
Well, it's like a Jeff Wood, buddy of mine, when he knew I was interviewing you, because he's a big sports guy. And like I told you before you got in here, I'm not the sportiest person. Like, I go to games, I love stuff, but I just don't know the I know the rules, but I'm just not up on the stats and the information. And on that note, like, is college sports kind of turning into professional now because people are getting paid, the athletes are getting paid? I'm not, obviously I'm not going to make a statement once or one way or the other. I don't know enough about it. Seems fine to me. But now, like the Big Ten, I think this is what he was telling me, the Big Ten and the SEC are essentially trying to outbuy each other, and we may be looking at 2 mega conferences. And because Iowa, who is getting a ton of money, maybe there's incentive for them to not play ISU because they're going to have a lot of conference games. So is there a possibility all this results in no Iowa State game? What do you think about that?
I think it's secure for the immediate future, but I think right now the landscape is shifting. The ground is shifting under us so fast that anybody who says that they know what's going to happen, they don't. I mean, who could have predicted after more than 100 years the Pac-12 would be no more? I mean, it's gone. It's gone.
I didn't even know that until an hour ago when someone told me that.
Yeah, you have nonsensical things like Stanford being part of the ACC, the Atlantic Coast Conference. I mean, Stanford's on the other coast. You have UCLA's softball team is going to fly across the country to play Rutgers in Maryland. I mean, that makes... There's really so many things that don't make sense, but it's all in the pursuit of money. I mean, money is at the bottom line of all this. I think that college athletics are going to be okay, but every bubble can burst. I mean, there are fans who have had enough. I think to some degree, much like the Olympics for a long time, it's probably been a little bit of a sham that these were amateur athletics. I mean, this isn't like high school. There have been, for a long time, to various degrees, there have been ways to get players money or incentivize them to come to a certain school. And there have been some schools that have tried to do it the right way. And now the courts have just said, you can't keep taking this kind of money and having these, all these streaming rights and media rights, hundreds of millions, billions of dollars, and keep pretending that these are amateur athletics. Mm-hmm. So in order to prevent additional lawsuits, the NCAA finally had to just rip off the Band-Aid and say, we're going to start sharing revenue with the athletes. But there's still so many questions of that. What about the teams, which is all the sports at most schools lose money, and they're funded by the money that football and men's basketball makes? What happens? Are the other sports in some kind of danger?
Oh, that's a good question.
What about Title IX? I mean, does that play into this at all? The thought that you have to have the number of scholarship athletes at your university that represents basically the male-female ratio you have at that school. There are a lot of things we don't know. But what we do know is money is the driver of all this, as it is in so many things. So your friend is right, Jeff. He's right in that the Big Ten and the SEC have so much power right now because they're going to be making quite a bit more revenue from the all-important media rights. And the Big 12 has been able to solidify itself, but it's not going to have the same amount of revenue that those two are. So is that going to make Iowa State weaker over time than Iowa? There was already a gulf between the amount of money they bring in, but this would seem like it will even increase that. We just don't know. The universities, the athletic directors at both places, and the presidents have said the game is not going away. They plan on it continuing. It's renewed for several years, but long term, we just don't know what's going to happen. It's we've gone from players not being able to transfer without sitting out a year to transferring all the time. It's basically free agency each off season. So it's changing fast. It is turning some people off, but we're still watching. So there's still money being generated. And kind of at the heart of all this is there's no more powerful entertainment entity in America right now than live sports, especially the NFL, lesser extent college football. How do you get people to stop watching their phones and their streaming services?
Right.
You put on live sports.
Yeah.
So that makes live sports more valuable than ever. So now what networks are doing, like NBC, which 13 is a part of, they're just putting game shows and reality shows on weeknights where you used to have, programming. You would, you knew the Thursday night lineup on NBC, must-see TV, that kind of thing. But now those shows are too expensive. They don't want to pay for those shows. They're taking the money they have to bid on live sports.
Wow. Because
that's how you get people back to their television. And we're seeing the NFL take crazy advantage of that in a way that irritates people, because now NFL games are on Peacock. They're on Netflix. They're on Amazon Prime. It's just really difficult to have all the services you need to have in order to just watch your team. And we all got spoiled by being able to just find the game we wanted to find. This is one of the conversations I have all the time with older people, is like trying to explain to them how to get Peacock, or, how to.
Yes.
I've finally landed on saying, do you have anybody younger in your life? Like, do you have a grandson or maybe a nephew, or do you have a neighbor that could come over? Because trying to explain, well, yes, it is an app, but you can still watch it on your TV. It's just really hard.
It's hard for me.
Yeah.
And I understand technology. I work in technology.
Right.
Sometimes it's hard for me to figure this crap out.
Sure.
I have to pull up ChatGPT sometime and say, where do I find this thing on what stream? Because we don't have cable. We cut cable a long time ago. We stream everything. It's all on demand. And so we're always looking, because there's always, well, you have to download Crackle now because they have this 1 month
Right.
subscription for, I think you guys stream. I know WHO TV streams on Roku, so that's fairly easy to find. There's some, I don't remember, Haystack or something streams it through or something like that. It's a
I
mess.
don't even know what Haystack is, to your
Total
point.
mess.
Yeah, it's wow. It's a lot. It's a lot to take in, and it's not letting up.
Last question. You've been here a while, and, state traders that we just don't like Chris Hassel. No, just kidding. Totally. Great dude. Obviously appreciate the work he's doing on the Iowa Everywhere podcast. But you've been here a while, and there are two patterns that I've seen, at least. You've been in Iowa for a while. You love the state. You're very open about that. It seems very genuine. If you're faking it, man, it's the best show I've ever seen. But also, you are very, very adamant about prioritizing family and your family relationships. Are those things tied together? Is that what has kept you here so long, the family here and the life you have here?
I think that Iowa is, I'm fortunate that I lived other places, so I think I have more appreciation for Iowa than maybe some people who take it for granted. I know we both know people who moved away and got out of college and they couldn't wait to get out of Iowa, and then they end up coming back. My son is one of those people. My son Cade, he moved away and came back. Early part of my life, I was in Vermont, and then I was in Florida, and there just isn't the sense of community that I've always felt here. I mean, we're not perfect, and there's a more division, it seems, right now than at any time I can remember in Iowa over various things like there is in our entire country. But when you need something or need somebody here in this state, people do come together and help, and I think that's wonderful, and I love being here, and I'm proud to be here, and I want to continue to be here. I could do without January and February. When we get older, my wife and I dream of maybe traveling for those 2 months.
Just got to get a sauna in the studios.
But it's a great place to raise a family. It is a great place to live. The cliches people have, and also, most people who live in Iowa are from Iowa. So I think there is more investment, like in your local sports and your local schools and your local communities. And people just, there aren't a bunch of people in and out. So it's been a really good place to work. And I think, at KXNO or at WHO 13, I think they've been able to stay relevant longer than stations have in many areas, just because there is the loyalty there, and people do still want local. I mean, it's easy for conglomerates to get rid of the local programming, local radio shows, in some cases local newscasts. They know they can put a national show in there and it won't be as highly rated, but they can eliminate the costs of hosts and producers and overhead. And in many places, that's what they've chosen to do, because it's
true.
The bottom line is better. It is a mistake.
Because local, and again, we're out of time, but local is, I could preach for probably 5 minutes straight about the value, the economic value of being more locally focused. The data,
it's real.
The data supports it. It is, but for some reason, a lot of these national companies are pulling back. They're focusing on national, regional content, which economically, from a business sense, is a mistake, I think. And just looking at the data,
I agree.
I wish I could go into that. I mean, there's a billion things. Like Caitlin Clark, NASCAR Cup Series. I wanted to talk about RV TV. There's no way.
We could take a few of them. What would you like to talk about? I don't want to cut off anything you want to talk about.
No, I just wanted to be good with your time, because we're at 4:00. We're pre-recording this for those that don't know.
Yeah.
And your wife let you out of the house. She let you do this thing, and I don't want to get on her bad side.
Well, let's go a few more minutes or whatever you want.
All right.
I appreciate that you prepare.
Well, what I wanted to spend is 20 more minutes on marble racing.
I'm really impressed that you got marble racing out of my pantomime there.
I remember marble. I remember marble racing. Just the the NASCAR Cup, like big announcement. And I guess more of my thing was, is this an unusual? I think we have a couple. My wife was texting Iowans going into the Olympics in gymnastics. Is it just me, or is it an unusually hot time for Iowa, specifically Iowa sports? I mean, Caitlin Clark is essentially the LeBron of WNBA. Like, she's not, whenever people talk about Caitlin Clark, they usually talk about her within context of the WNBA. Mm-hmm. Then you have to remind them, hold up, she's setting basketball records, not WNBA, not NBA. She's setting basketball records. So these are some huge, is this an unusually hot time for Iowa sports?
It does seem, yeah, I would say yes. In Iowa and Iowa State, which are the two main drivers of fandom in this state, they've really both been in a great decade of success across the sports that people care about the most. So I think that makes it so. We're seeing more and more men and women in all the sports come out of the state of Iowa. I mean, this used to be a place where to compete, you felt like you had to get most of your athletes from outside the state.
Right.
But to the credit of high school sports and some of the travel teams here, that is no longer the case. There's a lot of really talented athletes here. Child's gymnastics, you mentioned that, but
true.
Fed some gymnasts into the Olympics that have had gold medal success.
Yeah.
So all of that is speaks really well of Iowa. It probably speaks well of the history of Iowa, too, where the girls' sports here in high school, they're ahead of many states. You know, when you had a boys' union here, but you also had, you had a full Vets auditorium in the 50s and 60s there to watch girls' basketball. Where I was in Florida, like girls' sports were an afterthought. You know, they were just thought of more of as a recreational activity way back when I was in high school. That hasn't been the case. It has been something emphasized here, and the University of Iowa was kind of a trailblazer with women's athletics. When Caitlin Clark broke the all-time NCAA scoring record, which is not a small thing, and she ended up breaking it for men or women. She holds, men or women, most points ever scored.
Did she tie or beat a Steph Curry record or something? I'm going off memory here.
Yeah, she don't know about the Steph Curry record. Probably sometimes something to do with threes in the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, be careful because you're taking sports
game.
Trivia from the idiot sports guy over here, so be careful.
But she broke those records, and one of the things I remember at the time where she was approaching the NCAA record, and I did a commentary on, well, the record really is kind of Lynette Woodard at Kansas, but it was being presented by the NCAA, and everybody is Kelsey Plum, and Kelsey Plum, not taking nothing away from her, but as hard as it was to believe, Lynette Woodard, who was an All-American at Kansas in 1980 and 1981, women's sports weren't even allowed in the NCAA yet. That's not that long ago.
Oh, that's crazy. I didn't even make that connection.
So they celebrated with great fanfare when Caitlin passed Kelsey Plum, who had the NCAA record. But then Iowa, to its great credit, brought Lynette Woodard into the game where Caitlin passed Lynette Woodard. And it was always pretty certain that she was also going to pass Lynette Woodard. But the only reason that record was not there is because the NCAA had been actively working to keep women's sports out. They didn't want women's sports. Crazy. They just wanted men's sports.
That is crazy.
And in the current climate, it's really hard to imagine that happening and not being that long ago.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm in high school at that time. It's not it's not 1940. It's 1981 when Lynette Woodard was playing it.
Yeah.
So a lot has changed for the better in a fast amount of time. And here in Iowa, I do think in many ways these are the good old days for sports.
Is it? I know that there's so many thoughts around it, but like Caitlin Clark, obviously, as you said in one of your, I think I was watching the video on Twitter, you called her a lightning rod, which is so true. Mm-hmm. Certainly not by her. Yeah, she's not the one who put herself on the roof. But it's unreal. Like, is it as simple? I mean, people have said, oh, it's about racism. Oh, it's about jealousy. Do you have any idea what the real reason is? Because it seems so bizarre. But is it just because a lot of people have been working at WNBA for a while and all of a sudden she comes along and everything changes? Is it as simple as that just doesn't sit well with people?
I think it's many things, and I think a lot of people who have an agenda want it to be about one thing.
Right.
You know,
That's a good point.
It's about her being white. It's about her not being one of the best players in the WNBA yet. It's about her being heterosexual. It's about her being from Iowa.
I've heard that one too.
It's about her fan base.
Because Iowa's a dumb state, and no one with talent comes from Iowa. Yeah.
Some have said, you know, it's about her fans being so hypersensitive that they've turned people off.
Weren't like the opposing fans at a recent game booing their own player for some crazy antics? Yeah, that's wild.
That happened. That's
wild.
And some of it is just base level jealousy and resentment that any of us can relate to in whatever profession we're in, that sometimes you feel like somebody's getting more attention than they should get, or they move into a business that's been there a long time or a profession that's been there a long time, and some people act like it just started.
Right.
And there's there's some WNBA players have been like, wait, we've been here, the league's been around 28 years.
Right.
We've been great before you got here. And I think it's all of those things. And then, as can happen in this social media era, we probably pay too much attention to the loud fringes.
Yes.
You know, the fringe on the far left and the fringe on the far right. And then what happens that I don't think used to happen this much is this where the lightning rod part comes in, that even the media that wants to preach to the choir, they start to look for points that fit their agenda.
Yes.
And then they use that part to say, like right now with Caitlin Clark, there are broadcasters and writers on the right that are like using her for their points.
Yep.
And the same thing is happening on the far left. And she just wants to play basketball. And also she's being told that's not okay. No, you have to speak up. You have to take a stand. You have to, she looks like, she could use a hug and some time off right now on a vacation. I mean, this is a lot.
Yeah, it is. It's a lot of pressure.
And she's a trash talker. She's cocky out on the court. I'm sure some of that is one of these 10 things that go into the stew, that there were some people that couldn't wait to give her a little bit of a comeuppance. Mm-hmm. But any objective person would say she has stayed above all this and handled it really well. But I can't imagine being her parents right now and seeing her being used. Ugh. She wants to just play basketball, and she keeps being used. I mean, MSNBC, Fox News, whatever you pay attention to, Caitlin Clark is like the hot take debate on a nightly basis. She can't seem to get out of the news cycle.
It's so true. Has this changed, by the way? Because I did talk radio a couple of years. I don't even remember what it was. Mm-hmm. I remember angry callers, because I did more top news things, right? So your sports, I know you still get angry callers. People get really passionate about sports, maybe more than they do about politics, honestly.
They do at times.
But has this changed? Because I swear, when I was doing talk radio, when I was taking callers, you got people charged up, you got people mad. That's, whatever. That's normal. Mm-hmm. I feel like it's way worse. I hope I'm wrong, but I feel like the far left and the far right, the extremists of both groups, have way more than their fair share of the spotlight, and they are really starting to dominate the airwaves and get access into every major news network. I'm not saying hosts or whatever, but they seem to be taking they're supposedly a tiny percentage of us, but man, I swear they get like 90% of the airtime. Is this something that has changed, or is it just me?
I think it has changed. It's gotten worse. I think social media is at the heart of this. And there's so many people, if you could just get them into a room like we are now, right, and have a conversation, you could learn from each other. But most people are not interested in discourse. It's kind of like the Keanu Reeves line that I saw recently where he goes, I've reached the point in my life where if you want to tell me 1 + 1 = 5, that's fine. Yep. You go on thinking that. Yep. I'm not going to argue with you.
Right.
And I understand what he's saying, because most people are not interested in discourse or a nuanced conversation. What they want to hear is their already formed opinion said back to them. And if you don't match their already formed opinion. They just discard you and feel like you're an idiot. You have no idea what you're talking about. And that's why, like, the people watching Fox News or conservative talk radio, listening to conservative talk radio, or the people watching MSNBC or whatever far left-leaning radio talk shows they're listening to, those people they're already on that team.
Yeah.
Like, so each time they hear their opinion, they're like cheering that host. Like, oh yeah, man, yeah, this guy gets it. This guy knows what he's talking about. And that's kind of what we lost. And I do think the media has made it worse. There are still many great journalists and thoughtful people out there that
totally
are writing
agree.
well-informed articles, but there also is more pressure than ever to immediately get a reaction or a click, and there's misleading headlines where the story's not actually going to be read. The person's opinion is going to be formed just on that headline that's there. And we're just not talking to each other the way we used to, and minds are made up. And I don't know the percentage of this, but I think most of us have arrived at this. Are you kidding me? These are the two presidential candidates. This is the best we can do.
Right.
I mean, these are my choices.
Yeah.
And I know some people are passionately in each camp, and that you probably were offended by that. But I think most of us are like, come on.
Yeah. I agree.
It can't be one of these two.
How did this happen?
How did this happen? What? But then when you see what it's like out there, if you had the ability to run for president, wouldn't you think about it?
No way.
I wouldn't want to put my family through that.
Kids don't say that anymore. Like, remember when kids used to say, you're older than me, obviously. Yeah. I've only been by a year. But I remember when kids used to say, I want to be president when I grow up. And now that's like, no, I don't want to do that. And so if you're like discouraging all the level-headed, logical, rational people from running for president because they don't want to be skewered and their lives ruined, that kind of leaves the crazy people left. You know, if I'm looking 20 years down the road, I'm seeing that the absolutely insane people who are crazy, they're the ones that are going to run for president. We're going to be left with the bottom of the barrel in this country if we let it go further down this route.
I don't have the answer, and I wish I did. I know no one has it. Yeah, I mean, but I think.
Weren't you going to announce your candidacy? Isn't that why you're in
here? No.
Do you feel like you're on eggshells? And last question, because I now I'm trying to kick you out of here again.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
Sorry to your wife. But are you at this stage where you feel like you're on eggshells, like? Any just quick joke you make, someone might find that offensive. I know you've been doing this for a long time, but just last question, is it different now? Do you kind of feel a little guarded?
It is different, and I have friends in the business on some topics, whether it be gender or racial, or there are just some topics they won't touch.
Sure.
Because
understandable.
They feel like they're going to be taken out of context and in danger of, for lack of a better term, being canceled.
Yeah.
So there's some things they just won't weigh into. Andy and I have said that we feel like we have to talk, that we have to, and we have had these discussions, and sometimes they've been a little bit uncomfortable, and sometimes you do feel a little bit on the high wire, but I feel strongly that we need to talk to each other and respect each other and be kind to each other, even when our opinions differ. So if we don't do that, how can we expect anybody else to do it? So we don't reach that many people in the big picture, but we really want to try to show that you can do this, that you can have these conversations, that you can differ and then still be friends like we used to in this country.
I totally agree.
Instead of just, I disagree with you, so I'm just going to throw this verbal hate at you. And that just doesn't accomplish much. And I do get it. And in sports, Justin, it's unique in that the confirmation bias that I see, the Cy-Hawk confirmation bias and the red-blue confirmation bias, they're so strikingly similar. I mean, one is more important than the other, but like all the time, one of the most frequent comments I get from people, and it drives my wife crazy, but it'll be like people will come up to her or come up to us, and it'll be hey, I can tell you're a Hawkeye. I mean, you secretly are a Hawkeye, or I can.
That's hilarious.
It's clear you're a Cyclone. And even when Andy and I announced the end of the show, we had so many positive comments, but so many of them too were like, well, those two are a little too much Hawkeye for me, or those two are a little too much Cyclone for me. And they'll speak about our bias. And I will say back to them politely, but I'd be like, yes, there is bias involved. Yours, because you're hearing what you want to hear.
Yep.
Like when we're talking about, let's say this is someone who thinks we're Hawkeye fans. When we're talking about the Hawkeyes in a positive way, and you're a Cyclone fan, you hear that and it just grates on your nerves, and you're like, God, these guys just love the Hawkeyes. But when we talk about the Cyclones in a positive way, that doesn't strike that fan as the same way, because in that example, we're just talking about the natural order of things.
Yeah.
This is just the way it is. And that's the way the left and the right are now. When you say what they agree with, they just nod because, well, that's just a fact. That's just the way it is. But if you say something that's out of their zone, then they just think that you're with the other side, and they need to tell you that you're wrong and then that you're biased. And the politics and sports, I've come to learn, are really similar in that. It's kind of like,
that's so interesting.
National broadcasters are constantly being accused of being biased against their team. And what usually happens is these fans have been listening to their hometown announcers, on their network, where not only are they expected to be somewhat positive about the team they work for. Yeah, you're supposed to be
rah-rah for the home team. Yeah.
And then they hear a national broadcast, they're like, man, these guys are against us.
Yep.
Well, no, they're probably actually objective, but to your ears, it sounds the opposite. So did we solve everything?
We did.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I mean,
Wish I had more answers.
I told you before getting on here, don't worry, I'll keep it at a half an hour.
Yeah, no.
But I appreciate the extra time.
You're an easy guy to talk to, so it was me that kept talking, not you.
No, I really appreciate it. I know listeners will as well. Keith Murphy, Channel 13 Sports Director, of course, the local NBC affiliate. What's the easiest way to reach out to you? Should people follow you on Twitter, or I guess it's X now? What's the easiest way to reach out and see you?
I struggle with calling it X too. I'm on there, and I'm on Facebook and Instagram, and people can email me at any time. I try to answer all emails. It's keith.murphy@whotv.com.
And we'll make sure to publish your cell phone, home address, and no, just kidding.
Whatever
Keith, really appreciate you coming on the Iowa podcast.
My pleasure. I enjoy discourse.
And to my fellow Iowans, Iowa expats, and Iowans at heart, thanks for listening and subscribing to the Iowa podcast.